Hi there, Sarah Hill from Journalism 360. We are so glad that you joined us today. We have a Google Hangout with some very impressive individuals, and Nonny de la Peña, the godmother of VR. We're so glad that you've joined us to share some of your insight for not only creators who are just getting started in this space, but for creators who've been in the space a while and are still trying to keep up with the huge fire hose of information. So appreciate you joining us. If you all have questions for Nonny, you can tweet with the hashtag Journalism360. That's the hashtag Journalism360. Or you can also follow along with our discussion on Twitter, and our Twitter username is at Journalism360. So let's get started with some introductions. Of course, we have Nonny de la Peña. She combines real-time Unity graphics with some real-time eyewitness audio for some powerful journalism. She is the godmother of VR. She is the CEO and founder of Emblematic Group, and she's also a former research fellow. Nonny, so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat about VR journalism with everybody here.
We also have Lackey Sarah. She's from Tiny World Productions. She's a VR journalist. She's an educator and a producer, a writer as well. She's done a lot of immersive work. And Lackey, we're glad to have you here in the Hangout today.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Another thought leader, Robert Hernandez, in the immersive media space. He is a USC journalism professor and most recently completed a project that's fascinating. It involves drones and Google Earth, so we'll look out for that. You can also find his app in the app stores as well with his VR journalism group. Robert, glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get started first and foremost about Journalism 360. And if you're interested in this program, it has grants, it has research or training opportunities, and it also has some event opportunities coming up. And if you'd like to sign up, the best way to do that is to go to medium.com/journalism360, click on that bit.ly link and sign up. So let's get started, Nonny, with some information. There is so much information that immersive creators out there need to learn in form of terms. Audio is different. Video is different. The way that we captured video is no longer the same. Our north is no longer north. So first and foremost, photogrammetry is something that you are working in, and a lot of individuals are creating content with that particular tool. That is a term that some individuals might not be familiar with. So could you define photogrammetry for us?
Yeah, so the way that photogrammetry works is you basically are taking a picture of every inch of the space around you. And then what we're able to do is stitch those photographs together, and then it creates a volumetric space. We used to have to do things like called LiDAR or other ways that we had to scan environments. But now with a good SLR, and some software typically made by Agisoft, or there's a couple of programs out there, they'll auto-stitch the photographs for you and create a photorealistic environment that matches the real world one-to-one with volume. That means you're walking around a photorealistic representation of an environment. Super interesting, because before I used to have to just make these in CG. Well, now I can use photographs. And it's not an expensive process. I'm working with a number of photographers around the globe, and in fact, I'm training photographers on how to use this technology so we can start having a more robust library of photographic content. I mean, when you think of someplace like Aleppo, which we had to do when we made a Project Syria, we had to create those streets with computer-generated images completely. And yet, the streets that we tried to make one-to-one using maps and photographs and video, the streets don't exist anymore. So in that sense, having photogrammetric models, I think is going to be very historically important.
Okay.
And newsworthy. It's a very quick example. We have a guy shooting in Iraq for us right now with both 360 video and photogrammetry. And one of the things he thought he was going to get access to was a car that had been used in a suicide bomb. Now he can walk around the car, shoot it with a series of a bunch of photographs, and once he returns that to us, and by the way, there is some cleanup. It's not just like, oh, it's perfect with the photograph. There is cleanup we have to do. But even still, it's way more robust and inexpensive than it used to be. But now, if you have a headset that lets you have a positional tracking, which means it knows where you are and what position, and you're able to be tracked while you walk around, you can walk around the car that was used in that incident.
Fascinating. If you're just joining us, you're watching a conversation with Nonny de la Pena. She's the godmother of VR, and our Hangout are other immersive creators who are asking her lots of questions. Just joining us are Mitch Gelman. He is the CTO of the museum. Hi, Mitch. How you doing? And also Dennis of Haptical as well. He joined us and will be asking some questions. Appreciate you all sharing your time today. So, Lackey, let's go to you. You have a question or a comment for Nonny de la Pena.
Sure, yeah. I'm curious about your thoughts in terms of yesterday's footage from Standing Rock, just seen from the live streams on Facebook. At what point does that become too much for an immersive experience, or does it?
So this is a really interesting question that journalists have had to address all the way through. And I think that what's happening with Facebook Live right now has some parallels to the 1960s when we were broadcasting images of the Vietnam War into people's living rooms at 6 p.m., right at dinner time. And journalists had to consider what kind of impact that might be having on viewers who are too young to really to be exposed to that kind of material. And I think there's some of these same questions are being raised. Now, the difference between having something live and doing something in VR currently is that in general, we have a downtime in which we edit before we offer the content to our audience. And so whatever it is, 30, 40 years of journalistic considerations and ethical approaches to what we show our audience, audiences can then be applied to stories like what's happening in Standing Rock. There are a couple of teams out there shooting right now, and I've offered to help with posts on their projects. So hopefully, we're going to get a pretty good journalistic representation of what's happening there.
Robert Hernandez, do you have a question or comment for Nonny?
Sure. I've been fortunate to know Nonny for 7+ years when she was a research fellow here at USC Annenberg. And I've been on panels and been fortunate to moderate panels with Nonny. And the question I have for you, Nonny, is where you are now as the godmother of VR, what advice would you give Nonny 7 years ago who was struggling to define what immersive journalism is and being greeted by folded arms and people dismissing your work, essentially, not believing technology was going to come around? What advice would you give to that Nonny? And then the second part is, if there's a new Nonny starting out, do you think she should start with room scale or 360 video? What advice would you give someone starting out?
So I think for the Nonny way back when, what are some of the considerations I've learned is, it was pretty tough. So I think it's really easy now to go back and say, hang in there. It's gonna, you'll be amazed actually that this will become a acceptable form of journalism. Believe me, it was pretty tough at times for my entire family. But anyway, and today, the thing about 360 video is it can be very beautiful and it really represents reality currently, right? So I think that it's a wonderful medium. I am still, though, very fully committed to the idea of volumetric walk-around room scale content. We still are working on the vernacular in these fields. And the reason why is because you experience the real world through your whole body, the way that you feel in a space as much as what you see, right? So that sense is something that means more naturally, how do we really experience stories? And I think that that's the one thing about room scale walk around. It comes a little closer to that. And that's why I've always been very dedicated to pushing that field forward. And now the technologies are catching up. However, room scale walk around is still more of the IMAX. 360 video making is a very accessible format. It's literally just stitching together cameras, film, something that we're very used to dealing with technologically. And it's easy to see on a mobile phone. The distribution is very simple at the moment. So it's sort of a easier bar to get to if you're starting out in VR. And the good thing about it, it does begin to teach you understanding of how do you create stories when the story happens all around the viewer. And you aren't going to be able to control which way they look. So you have to be thinking about how do you make the content in a way. You have to be thinking about how do I make these shots without being in the shot? How do I film when I can't be there to even direct the person to say what I want them to say, because otherwise I'm going to show up on camera. These are things that I think will also, whatever we learn from 360 is going to be also applicable in terms of storytelling when we move into room scale and volumetric.
And so what techniques are you using to direct the audience's attention?
Here's a really interesting thing. If you think of the way that if somebody's standing by a building looking up, and then slowly but surely everybody else starts looking up, stand up, you know what I mean? If somebody's pointing their finger upward, humans are attracted to humans. They're attracted to what are they looking at and thinking about. So that's certainly a very, very simple tool I learned really early on, that people want to see what other people are seeing and doing, right? So that's the number one attractor. Sound is another one. If you need to use sound to, the one thing about building in virtual reality is you're able to spatialize sound. So if you have a story of, I'm just making this up, but like a child hiding under a bush, you would be looking around for that child and that sound would be spatialized according to where that bush was, right? So these are a couple of the techniques that we use, but I think, again, I often tell people, close your eyes, feel your body in the space, and then think about what does that mean for you to direct your story.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Dennis from Haptical just joined us. Dennis, introduce yourself, and you have a question or a comment for Nonny de la Peña.
Yes. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I was a little bit late. My name is Dennis. I'm a technology journalist and the founder of Haptical. Haptical is a news and information source for all things virtual reality. And Nonny, it's very nice to see you here. We were together almost a month ago for a conference. Nonny, my question would be, I've been talking to a lot of executives from the media about the potential of VR, and almost all conversations end up saying like, virtual reality is good, it's entertaining, it's very engaging, but it's not mainstream yet. So how would you elaborate that for, like, what should the newsrooms do for now to invest in this medium and to be a pioneer, maybe? How would you elaborate that?
So there's kind of a few tiers here to think about, or a few things to unpackage. So one of the questions to date is, what will the impact of the Sony Morpheus have, right? That's what I was mentioning, that it's got, there's 65 million active PlayStation users. What effect is a headset that's just an add-on to the PlayStation going to have? We don't know yet, right? Secondly, currently, we often will build pieces that are able to be shown on the web as much as shown in walk around for major clients. Sometimes they need a web-based piece as well, just to make them feel like they've got their bases covered. For example, we're working on a really, really powerful VR piece on in the Sudan mountains, in the Numa Mountains, where there's been the longest standing war. And we're not only shooting a 360 video, and I've had people embedded in there, and the footage is incredible, but we're also doing a broadcast documentary for Arte. So right now, there's still a moment of how do you do both things and make sure that we're able to deliver across as things grow. But the final thing I would say is, and Robert, I'm sure you can back me up on this one. And you remember at USC, we were doing these groups where we were bringing together journalism students, business school students, and engineering students to try to create some apps to solve journalism problems. And I remember being told quite forcefully by a number of people that we shouldn't design for the smartphone because we're going to miss audiences in Africa and South America. Right? It's laughable now, right? It's a laughable idea. And yes, we're at the start of the smartphone era, but if you don't understand how to do this kind of journalism, you're going to lose the ability to stay ahead of the curve. And audiences are going to be looking to the leaders in the field as they get access to the, as the hardware gets cheaper, as it becomes something simple in your pocket. Here's the other thing you have to be aware of. Qualcomm, Intel, all of their chips that they're working on will allow you to scan people and environments and make them into 3D models very quickly. Mm-hmm. So right now it's still a little bit labor intensive, But in the very near future, excuse me.
Bless you. Bless you.
In the very near future, everybody's smartphone is going to turn into a volumetric capture device. So you are not going to want to show people somebody in a flat 2D way. You're going to want to show somebody in their full, much more like the real person, right? And that's a no-brainer. And the fact that audiences are going to have this tool in their back pocket. So as far as I'm concerned for newsrooms, you might look at today and say, that's right, not everybody has a VR headset in their living room, but you better, figure out how to do this for the future. There's a lot of ways to offer interesting monetization with VR that also can help support newsrooms. So at a moment when it's really easy to cut and paste video and cut and paste text, experience is harder. And I think this is a really interesting way that newsrooms could think about also financially supporting themselves.
So let's talk just a little bit about the business of VR. You mentioned monetization. What advice would you give to VR journalism startups or other content creators out there, because they are essentially creating content for headsets that not everyone has access to, which makes it incredibly difficult to monetize. So what advice would you give people to overcome some of those challenges, and what's coming down the bend perhaps that we aren't aware of?
So I was just checking out Hulu yesterday, right? There's Hulu. It's kind of an OTT, meaning over the top, meaning avoid, going around the cable company, right? Putting it right into the broad web for you, content. And they have invested in every single platform. Hulu is available on every single platform: Cardboard, Gear VR, PlayStation, Oculus, Vive. Now, they've put the platform out there, but guess what? They don't have the content. They don't have the VR content. That means the content makers are actually kind of sitting in the catbird seat right now. They're going to need you. And I'm starting to hear other 360 filmmakers in particular are getting picked up, are getting bought by Hulu. I can tell you, I can't discuss specifics, but I can tell you a major competitor of theirs is going to be jumping on that bandwagon soon. So this is a industry that's growing quickly. If you would think that just a year and a half ago, I was still making my own headsets, like literally 3D printing them in my mother's garage. Literally, kid you not.
Love it.
A year and a half ago, guys, right? A year and a half ago. And now Vives are all over the place, and positional is available. Oculus is going to be positional. Morpheus is out there. A year and a half. So what does this mean in a couple of years from now? I'll let you mull that one for a bit.
Let's bring in Mitch Gelman, another immersive media thought leader. Mitch, you have a question or comment for Nonny de la Peña. By the way, if you have a question on the stream, our hashtag is journalism360. Mitch?
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here with Nonny, Robert, Dennis. Read your stuff all the time. Thank you. Nonny, I have two questions. One, you were referencing some of the Qualcomm chipsets, particularly I saw the Snapdragon reference platform up at the VRDC conference. Can you talk for a moment a little bit about that and what the potential is there? And then secondly, one of the challenges that we're having at the museum is in introducing the Vive is because there's so many people who come through, is where do we put the wire? And any thoughts, anything that you've seen that our operations staff is mindful that it could be a tripping hazard, and if you have any experience in avoiding that, I'd love to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Well, I'm laughing because my headsets were wireless, at least. We had HDMI transmitters to make sure our headsets were wireless. Not even so much worried about people tripping, as we were so sick of following them around with a thick cable and making sure that, oh my God. Anyway, so I had many heads that I put those headsets on, so I understand your pain, Mitch. But the good news is, I don't know if you heard that Vive is funding a startup that has created a kit for wireless headsets to go with the Vive. They sold out like instantaneously. But they'll have more soon, and this is, you know, if I could make my headset wireless a year and a half ago, you know, last couple of years, believe me, these guys can figure out how to do it better and more cheaply than I can. This is coming. We all hate the bloody cable. And it's just a short matter of time before this issue disappears as well. It's already disappearing. Like I said, Vive is funding a company that's doing just that.
And then the second question was about the Snapdragon reference platform.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah,
And
sure.
a lot of talk about internal cameras and internal motion tracking. Is that something that that you anticipate this has the potential to unleash, or is that still going to be down the line?
Well, everybody keeps talking about Sony being Apple being the kind of silent, you know, monster about to unleash its power, and that the iPhone 7 has 2 cameras for depth sensing, and they bought some of the best depth sensing technology a couple of years ago. So one expects that Apple hopefully is going to use that. They also bought, interestingly, on a separate issue. So I think that yes, the mobile companies understand that both positional and depth are the future, and that they will be providing the tools that we need to put our content on. And interestingly, also, you must remember that Apple bought a company called FaceShift a couple of years ago now, a year and a half ago maybe. And what FaceShift was a very simple program where you looked into your camera and you could puppeteer a face. And with the ability to scan your own face and then puppeteer your own face, you know, you won't have to worry about turning your camera off on Google Hangouts because you haven't brushed your teeth. So, you know, that's coming too. I think that we're going to see the ability to communicate with volume in the future as well.
Nonny, we really needed an entire hour with you, but we want to be cognizant of your time. We know that you're a very busy individual, so thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you sharing your expertise.
Absolutely, I'm so appreciated. It's great to see all these wonderful faces and meet new ones, and I hope it's useful, and I really look forward to continuing conversations in person.
Absolutely.
Not virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe in VR in the future, that would be great. So hats off to you. You're paving the path that we all are walking on. So thank you again for your time. And thank you all of you in the Hangout for your great questions and on the stream as well. We'll get to some of those will be on the stream after we close this Hangout. If you'd like more information about Journalism 360, be sure to go to medium.com/journalism360. Sign up on that bit.ly link. We have events. We have research grant opportunities as well. And we just like to get together and geek about this new medium of immersive media. I'm Sarah Hill of StoryUp VR. We hope you've had a great day today, and good luck on that next project. We'll see you later.